Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world this fantastic December day, or if you're watching us on catch up, I hope there's something in the next 30 minutes or so that will be of use to you as we come towards the end of an incredibly busy and very uncertain year in some ways, and we look ahead to 2026. So welcome to the 8th and final live panel of 2025 at the Situation Room. It's part of a series we do every month throughout the year, and wherever you're joining us from in the world, hopefully you've seen one or two of the other sessions along the way, so you'll know how it goes. But the Situation Room basically is a thought leadership forum. It's all about engagement, so please do engage with us today if you can. Use the Q&A inbox and just send in any questions that you might have, and we'll attempt to get to as many as we can. It was all about an article that we published last month about transformation. This is a chance today to ask questions of a fantastic panel. I'll introduce them in just a second. But as I say, if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat for us. If we run out of time, we'll aim to answer them separately in the Situation Room chat itself, because where the article was, that's obviously live and you get a chance to join that and follow on the conversation. So our focus today is all about placing your bets. Is safety and sustainability transformation possible in these uncertain times? And we chose that word transformation very carefully because, of course, there's real potential beyond simple compliance and actually going into a chance where you can use safety and sustainability to really change the face of your organization, whatever it is that you do. So we're joined today by Tom Asserton, who's from VP White, one of our very excellent partners here at EcoOnline. He's a senior digital EHS consultant with deep experience of digital transformation, change management, and the power of data-driven insights in international contexts. Also, Katerina Fiedler, Kat, who's with Murphy's. She's an operations director, really driving the Great Grid Partnership. So some fantastic work happening there. And she brings extensive experience of transformation and change across infrastructure, utilities, the rail, and the construction sector. So she's seen a wide range of this challenge over the years. I'm joined by Dr. Richard Tipper, who's our EcoOnline Chief Science Officer and the CEO at Resilience Constellation. And me, I'm David Pixon, also at EcoOnline. I'm the Senior VP of ESG, Safety and Sustainability. So our focus for the next 30 minutes or so is on the challenge of setting budgets and priorities for 2026 amid that regulatory uncertainty, the economic headwinds we've seen this year, and the sort of competing business pressures that we're aware of swirling around different organizations. So as safety and sustainability leaders look to place their bets in that sort of volatile environment, do we need to re-examine what we mean by transformation and how we make progress? Now, safety and sustainability, of course, should always be targeted towards improvements that strengthen compliance, trust, and key business priorities, but there's a fair few sets of opposing forces at work. You've got things like accelerators where new regulations or investor stakeholder expectations can drive change forward. But we've also got brakes, things that restrict progress, if you like, shrinking budgets, pressures on returns on investment, policy U-turns like reductions in the CSRD regulation scope across sustainability in the European Union, which was just finally voted in on yesterday. And in competitive environments, of course, waiting can itself be the risk. Research from Deloitte has showed us that around 83% of leaders expect to increase their sustainability investments throughout this year, but around 78% as well expect their environmental, health and safety expenditure to increase over the next 3 years. So it's an area that still remains very much a key for investment. And our exam question for today is how to set and stay focused on the safety and sustainability priorities, if you like, amid that uncertainty. So how do we place our bets for 2026? So let's turn to our panel without further ado, to our headline question. How should safety and sustainability professionals assess their balance of investment with minimum compliance perhaps at one end of the scale and unlocking real value in terms of efficiencies and productivity for competitive advantage? That's at the other end, if you like. So I'm going to turn to Tom first and just ask you for your thoughts, Tom.
Thank you. I would say start at the beginning and make sure you are compliant, make sure your basics are in place and functioning correctly, and then you know you're at a good starting point. Once you know you're compliant, you can then start to look at how you're adding value and developing that competitive advantage to your organization. I'd say it's crucial to make sure that any investment you do make is going to add value, and that when you enact that change, it's going to be delivered effectively. that's largely, in my mind, around planning and understanding the market you're operating in, making sure you understand where your opportunities are as an organization, and then how you and your department fit into that organizational structure and can develop and deliver value as well. I think largely it's around making sure you understand what your return on investment is aimed to be, and then working out how you actually deliver it. I think we've all seen change plans that promise the world and deliver confusion. And so it's focusing on your change management, your project management, as well as picking targeted areas that will deliver value to the organization.
Brilliant, thanks, Tom. Very comprehensive, especially I like that idea of remaining focused on that value and picking those targets particularly. Well, Kat, I wonder if we might turn to you, your thoughts perhaps on how professionals can assess that balance of investment from compliance through to real value.
Thank you, David. I think to echo Tom's point, compliance is a given, that's the baseline. But if we stop there, it feels like a defensive move that can stand in the way of growth and value creation that safety and sustainability can offer. So we just need to look at, in my view, on safety and sustainability investments as a portfolio of solutions that need to link to the overarching business strategy. Clearly having a very well-defined business strategy with clear objectives around safety and sustainability can then act as the assessment framework, because it brings to light some of the interconnections and interdependencies that then help boards prioritize their investment decisions. So as an example, I would say, and I would always argue, that creating a highly engaged workforce, if that's one of your strategic objectives, is impossible without having a first-class engagement on safety. So any solutions that enable safety engagement also drive your people agenda. You could also look at it from a sustainability perspective, that if you look at the younger generation that is in the workplace now or is entering the workplace, they're super engaged around how sustainable the business that they're working for is. And for them, it goes well beyond salary and career prospects and promotions. They want to be working for the good guys. And in staff engagement surveys, this is one area that comes to the forefront more and more. So having clear and effective sustainability agenda is also at the heart of how the business inspires and drives engagement and retention of staff. So that's probably one way of it.
Perfect, thanks, Kat. I like that particular point about using it, as a chance to engage. As you know, particularly in the sectors you've worked in, that's crucial that people are engaged with just not only the safety but also the overall objectives. So thank you for that. Richard, just turning to you, perhaps your thoughts, perhaps on assessing that balance of investment.
Yes, I think I'm very interested in what Katie just said about employee-driven sort of engagement, but the requirement to kind of keep employees motivated. I think another driver beyond compliance, of course, is investors and key customers, and this is quite true. I work quite a lot in the food and agriculture sector, and a huge amount of activity is driven by what is perceived as and what is actually being demanded by groups of investors or groups of key customers, and obviously going through to the end customer, which is usually the public. Now, there has been a huge amount of investor-driven ESG sustainability work going on. I think we're at a point where quite a bit of that is being put on pause or being in a sort of uncertain moment because of political forces, mainly from the US. Certain investors are kind of wanting to kind of double check that those kind of sustainability investments are actually driving value and not just what they would regard as sort of woke sentimental things that are being done just for kind of marketing gloss. And it's interesting that there is also a bit of a pushback from some customers to say, what some of the sustainability agenda that companies have been doing in the past have been more for marketing purposes rather than genuine progress. So I think there's often quite a challenge for people within the businesses to articulate, well, within that, what are the things that will really add the value and that will get the support from the different types of stakeholders and their different kind of views of what they're after.
Yeah, thank you. Really good points there. Of course, that idea of perhaps reevaluating, the last 3, 5, maybe 10 years or so of what we've been through, but actually reevaluating what value this is genuinely going to deliver. Okay, if we move on to another question now, for Tom and for Kat. In your experience, Tom, which is more of a problem, do you think, in holding back that transformation to achieve that? Is that external uncertainty or internal indecision? Is there a view on that?
I think you have to recognise external uncertainty can limit your ability to deliver transformation. But in my experience, I'd say it's internal indecision that has a bigger impact in practically delivering that transformation. I think, as we just heard, there are so many different stakeholders internally, whether that is investors or clients, or I appreciate they're not internal, but different people, so many different stakeholders that will have an opinion. And I think it really comes down to the clarity of the message you're sharing when you're trying to deliver transformation. Do those stakeholders understand the transformation you're trying to achieve? And does it align with their values and what they perceive as the organizational values? And that's where that wider piece of work comes in terms of communicating the value and change you can deliver, but making sure you align with the organizational strategy and it's all one joined up piece.
Brilliant, thank you. And Kat, your thoughts? That balance between what holds up or what's worse at holding up transformation, is it external uncertainty or internal indecision?
I do support Tom's views on this, and maybe offering a view as an operational person, and being at the operational coalface in a number of sectors. You're faced with uncertainty every day, and it's no better or worse today than it was 20 years ago. It's just different. And the only thing that is certain is the fact that there's uncertainty and there will be change. So any project or service, the success of your plan or program is always linked with your ability to pivot and respond to change. And you have to do that more often than not without perfect data sets and all of the information that you need to make the decisions. And I think especially in a current age where we've got data and information at our fingertips, there's this insatiable hunger for, I need more data before I can make a decision. And sometimes that's just not possible. It's not practical. So I would always say that internal indecision tends to be the challenge when it comes to transformation, because naturally, when you're making these quite often big investment decisions, you want to grab hold of as much certainty as possible through the data. But how much certainty is enough for me will be very different to you or to Tom. So it varies usually from person to person, but it's also determined by the culture and the rules of the business that you're in. One thing maybe to overcome is perhaps focusing on increasing flexibility and future-proofing of the solutions. So not knowing what the outcome is okay if you know that the solutions that you're putting in place and that you're implementing are flexible enough to give you options further down the line.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's a great point to make. I think that echoes some of what we said earlier in the year about resilience. This resilience being the ability to withstand shocks and being that flexible as best you can for that. That's a really, really powerful point. I think the thing for me as well is this idea that arguably you can't control external uncertainty, but you can have an influence on internal indecision. This sort of almost control the controllables in a way. Good, thank you. A question coming in from the audience out here, actually. Tom, Richard, I wonder if we could turn to you for those. The question was, how can we maintain our momentum amongst these times of uncertainty? So it's perhaps just a few top tips in terms of the ways of trying to keep that momentum up. Tom, perhaps you first.
I would say try and develop a clear plan of the progress and transformation you want to make. And that needs to align with your organizational values. Appreciate we are seeing variation in levels of regulation, particularly in the sustainability side. But organizations that value their environmental impact can still choose to act on that and be progressive. Safety, maybe not so much variation in the legislation and regulation, but again, organizations that put safety at the forefront of what they do can still be progressive. So to maintain momentum, I'd put a long-term plan in place, review it regularly, and make sure you're, as Kat mentioned, future-proofing. Are you looking ahead? What additional legislation might be coming? What new technology may be coming in to disrupt your organization? And just, again, Kat said it, be flexible. Make sure you are planning in resilience.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And Richard, perhaps turning to you, any tips for organizations seeking to maintain their momentum in these times of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think it's essential for businesses to have for leadership in this area and focus. I think what I've seen in quite a lot of businesses in the retail and food spaces that they've often become a bit subject to so many different external pressures and trying to do many different initiatives, and it's quite easy to lose momentum if you're trying to kind of comply with so much stuff, and you're trying to build in, reporting to lots of different people or lots of different initiatives. So I think there is a danger that there has been a bit of a plethora of reporting schemes and sustainability initiatives, and you really have to kind of focus on the ones that are going to add value, decide which ones you're going to go with, and have the leadership there to kind of keep that focus. I think that's really the key. Yeah, I mean, I think that, just to kind of go on about what this kind of diversity is, often it's, we've got demands in the food sector on that the food has got to be more healthy, more sustainable. You've got a low carbon initiative, zero carbon or net zero initiatives. You've got biodiversity issues. You've got chemicals, and all those things. Really, it's important to. I mean, while you probably have to do something on many of those, but you have to really focus on which ones are going to give you the best value, and cover the kind of absolute basis as well. But yeah, focus is the key, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. Yeah, the point about focus, I think, is very well made. Thanks for that. Kat, I wonder if we could turn to you with some specific examples now. You still work in some extremely challenging sectors, environments, and market phases as well. Could you share one or two examples, perhaps, of how you've kept your focus and perhaps avoided that decision paralysis?
Sure. I would probably choose the last 5 years that I spent in social housing contracting. Social housing is a sector that has come under significant regulatory scrutiny in that time period. So there's been a number of events that have driven changes to legislation. So, for instance, the new Building Safety Act came out as a result of the Grenfell strategy. And it introduced entirely new regulatory framework for managing fire safety in design, construction and refurbishment of high-risk buildings. Similarly, the new AWABS law was introduced in October this year, and it came on the back of tragic death of a 2-year-old boy, Awab Ishak, due to exposure to damp and mold. And again, this piece of legislation brought new statutory requirements for dealing with hazards in social housing portfolios for social landlords. I think it's an understatement to say that these have been hugely impactful in the entire social housing sector. But none of these new pieces of legislation gave definitive answers on how certain key things are to be dealt with. So as a business, then you have a decision to make. You either sit and you wait for absolute clarity, and somebody's going to give you the answer at some point. But you are risking falling behind in terms of your understanding, making changes to your existing systems or implementing any new solutions. Or, which tends to be my preferred solution to most things, you try and get onto the front foot and you try and shape some of the solutions. And in that process of shaping, you engage with clients, you engage with industry experts, regulatory bodies, you disagree on many things with people, you fall out, and then you come together and you agree on other things. But what you're doing through that process that is messy and can be quite spicy at times You shape each other's thinking, which brings on your understanding and your team's understanding of all the challenges and all of the interconnections that can be quite subtle. So as the landscape starts to shift and you've got the new case law that comes forward, or things develop a bit more, you are in a lot better position to respond to those challenges because you already have a feel for it. And having a feel for that landscape is a really important part of it. You can't develop it unless you're in it and you're actively engaging with those issues. The one main thing that I've learned through this process, and bear that in mind, is that you're going to get things wrong, and you've got to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important point, as you say, is not being afraid of failure as long as you fail fast and learn from it, and put lessons in place to keep up the momentum. Yeah, thank you. Tom, perhaps we could turn to you. Could you share some examples of the work that VP White's doing, if you like, to help organizations navigate this uncertainty and maintain progress?
Yeah, so I'd probably start with maybe the obvious, but all the work we do is context and organizational dependent, and depends on where our clients are as to what their needs are. So two examples that jump to mind is working with a construction organization who are right at the beginning of their sort of digital transformation process, just beginning to put in digital tools, replacing paper-based systems, etc. And so what we're doing with them is working to develop a tool that we fully recognize needs to scale and grow with them as an organization. And so working to not force them down specific pathways in terms of technology if they don't yet know what the next 5 years will look like in terms of their digitization and their growth. And then using a clear roadmap to make sure, so we've got a 5-year plan in place that's going to scale from safety to then cover ESG, quality, audits, and build out the real sort of suite of QHSE tools that they currently don't have, and then regularly reviewing that roadmap to make sure we are flexing with them, and as their business grows and technology comes out that impacts the way they work. Then at the other end of that scale, we're working with a national utilities and maintenance company that's much more mature in terms of their digital processes. And so we're working on a much more iterative process where we are taking existing tools, using a sort of you said we did feedback process to improve user engagement and develop or deliver short improvements that provide quality of life improvements to that user experience, helping them generate more data, increase usage, and enable those sort of evidence-based decision makings that we like to talk about. At the same time, we're doing work with them that's much more sort of progressive. So we're looking at integrating AI, particularly into their analytics, to make sure they're getting the most value from their data, and that the sort of the classic Donald Rumsfeld unknown unknowns, what can they learn if they've already done their traditional pieces of learning, what else is there they can gain from it?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I like that very much. And I like the idea that obviously this is a bit of a journey as well, of course, isn't it? You've got to let some of it unfold, as it goes through, and not be thrown off by some of it, because it takes time, of course, to make those connections and learn from those insights. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Richard, I wonder if we could just turn to you now. I mean, you've worked for decades, obviously, in the emerging world, as it was at the time, of ESG and sustainability. As you look at the regulation around, what would your advice be, if you like, for organisations trying to work out where to place their bets, particularly in the world of ESG and sustainability?
Yeah, well, thanks for pointing out the decades, David. Yes, I would. my top tip: don't forget about climate change. I mean, it's getting some pushback at the moment, and it's become less fashionable. Whereas 2 years ago, it was net zero was all the rage, and I think a lot of companies started to make plans or pledges that perhaps they didn't even have a clear idea about how they would deliver them. And now is a time, I think, when to perhaps think more carefully about what's achievable when, and what will fit within the agenda. That's one side. The other side of climate change, of course, is adverse impacts from severe weather events or changing conditions. And I think there have been quite a few companies have done this in a superficial way, but there needs to be a more in-depth analysis about specific areas of risk and specific areas, not just the health and safety aspect, but what aspects of operations will potentially be affected as well. So I think I would say, climate change is still a very big one, and that would be my main areas to focus on.
Indeed. As you say, this is a long-term investment, a long-term bet, and a long-term risk, but we're starting to feel some of the shorter-term impacts now of that as well, aren't we? So it is becoming very real.
Yeah. We have customers.
Okay.
Sorry. I was just going to say we have customers in Sri Lanka recently and a member of staff in our other business, and their neighbours were actually carried away and killed by recent floods. Ooh. So this is like very. It's happening all around the world in a big way.
Yeah. It is, yeah, and I think I think currently the UK being lashed by Storm Bram, I think as well. In a sort of very localised way, the impacts can be quite severe. Okay, just turning to Tom and Kat again. If you look ahead to sustainability safety professionals locking in and focusing their priorities, keeping up that momentum, if you like, would you have any tips for them on how they communicate and possibly defend them amongst competing priorities? Tom, I wonder if you would share your thoughts.
Clear messaging and simple communication that make sure you're aligning to organizational values and not just focusing on the benefits you can bring to your own department. I think a classic example is safety is not a silo. You need to show that you are aware of organizational strategy and that you're aligning with it. Safety, sustainability provide wide-ranging benefits and value to an organization outside of the sort of standard concepts we may have of them. You spoke at the beginning about reducing budgets and this constraints on teams to fight for money to spend to deliver change. So to defend yourself, make sure you are showing that return on investment across the entire organization. You'll make sure you're engaging with HR and finance and showing the value you can have and the impact you can have to them and to your customers. And that is the easiest way of driving senior leadership engagement.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. And Kat, your thoughts on how to communicate and possibly defend priorities amongst other competition?
I think I perhaps look at this from a perspective of a person that these ideas are often pitched to. I have a mental sort of shortcut where I look at these initiatives. I tend to look at a couple of things. So first one is, does it remove waste and does it improve efficiency? Does it remove double handling? So what is being offered? Is it going to make us more efficient? And it's got a cost implication, but also it's got a massive cultural implication because nobody likes double handling and reworking. So having solutions in that space that unlock that will always help. Second angle I always look at, and this is probably from a perspective of always working with large workforces that are field-based, and safety being hugely at the forefront of any decision. I'd always look at it from a viewpoint of, does it help or hinder the culture that I'm trying to instill in that workforce? Is that going to make a team more engaged or less engaged? So that would drive me. And then the third thing I'd always look for is, what are the links to the wider business strategy? So what else are you unlocking in the process of implementing these safety and sustainability initiatives? Quite often we forget about that because on the org chart, they sit in different boxes. You've got a people box, you've got a health and safety box, you've got a sustainability box. But actually, if you are able to build a narrative that goes, we do this and these things fall into place like Tetris, that makes for a really powerful narrative.
Brilliant, thank you. And I love that link back to culture, as you said as well, link to objectives, very powerful. Well, incredibly, we're almost out of time now. So I just wonder if I might ask you, each of you, just your a few sort of fast summary points really on a final question. As we look to the head, of course, and we look at, okay, what do you think the future looks like for the issues and challenges presented by regulatory and economic uncertainty? Any last thoughts, Richard?
Well, these are certainly challenging times, and I'd say don't always feel that you have to be transformational, because don't underestimate the power of incremental change. And so if you can't get a transformational budget, go for incremental improvements, and you can still make progress.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Yeah, incremental improvement, very powerful. Tom, the future, what do you think it looks like for issues and challenges around this uncertainty?
It looks uncertain, but as Kat said earlier on, uncertainty is a constant. I think you'll find regulation is the minimum, but there is opportunity to exceed regulation, develop best practice. Organizations that value the environment and their impact on it and their health of their workers will always have an opportunity to provide value to themselves and to their customers.
Brilliant, thanks, Tom. And Kat, the final word from you, really, on what the future looks like from your seat.
It will continue to be uncertain, as we've just established. And picking up on Richard's points, in business, you never stand still. If you're not evolving or progressing, you are falling behind, essentially. So I think there's probably three things I'd focus on. First one, developing culture and teams that are resilient to working in this environment and dealing with change and can adopt agile mindset of evolving ways of working and responding to change and complexity. Secondly, having systems and processes that can flex and adapt to support those teams. And thirdly, accepting that the fact that being on the front foot involves a lot of trial and error, and failure is part of that process.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for emphasising that. This idea that perhaps some folks are guilty of seeking perfection at the enemy of being good enough to make progress and keep up momentum. Brilliant. Well, thank you, team. I mean, thank you very much to the panel today, who've been incredibly comprehensive in their answers. Thank you for that. Covered a lot today, and we've got to most people's questions, I think, as well. So, Tom, thank you very much. And Kat, thank you for your time. And Dr. Richard Tipper, thank you for your time as well. Hopefully there was something in all of that for you to help you place your bets for 2026 and beyond, and keep up momentum, linking it to culture and to strategic priorities and objectives. But good luck with the uncertainty that's out there. I'm sure you'll navigate your chart and path the best way you can. So thanks for joining us. Have a very safe run into the end of 2025. Stay safe and stay sustainable in 2026 as well. And if there's anything we can do, of course, just drop us a line. We'll be there. Thank you.